Yes, welcome, Thembisa Fakude, from Senior Research Fellow and Director at Afrasid. Thembisa, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. So the first round of talks between Russia and Ukraine held last month concluded without a breakthrough, as we know. Now, these talks, the latest talks in terms of the two sides come as the two sides have escalated attacks. I mean, is there any indication that either side is approaching these talks with a shift in posture, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this morning we had a very celebratory Volodymyr Zelenskyy after the attacks in Russia yesterday. And he continued to talk about the achievement of the Ukrainian troops and how they surprised the Russians. And this is, as far as is concerned, one of the most significant attack on Russia. And this happens hours before the meeting that is about to take place in Istanbul. So it doesn't look like both parties are actually interested in one ceasing fire, because after those attacks, Russia has also gone on an offensive, attacking various installations inside Ukraine. So these are parties that are going to be sitting right now, but at the same time counting their losses and the number of people that have been killed in less than 16 hours.
And it would appear that the U.S. is getting really impatient. I mean, speak to us then about the role of the U.S. and what likely would happen, you know, from a Donald Trump perspective. We know, of course, the White House repeatedly saying and warning that it will walk away, you know, from the war if the two sides remain stubborn.
Well, the manner in which Donald Trump initiated the discussions, that in itself was problematic, because he was imposing himself on Ukraine, but at the same time imposing himself on Vladimir Putin on what he wanted to see. So it was not a person or a country that wanted to facially understand what actually is going on. He went on, if you remember, to accuse Volodymyr Zelenskyy of having started the war. And he shown, at least in the beginning of the intervention, that he was on the side of Russia, and that, of course, blew up in his face, and he had to change tact and his tune in terms of how he started dealing with Vladimir Putin. And I think now the United States find itself in a position where they realize that rhetoric and threats alone is not going to be able to solve this war. They need to actually speak to both leaders. President Trump is undertaken to speak to Vladimir Putin, and he did say after his trip to the Gulf that nothing will happen until himself and Vladimir Putin meet.
And speak to us about the significance of Turkey's role here. I mean, its positioning in its role as mediator and perhaps influence on NATO, EU, USA.
Turkey is very important because it sits geographically very strategically. It sits and controls, for lack of a better term, in terms of the exit and the entry into the Black Sea. And both Russia and Ukraine do depend on the Red Sea for various of their exports. So Turkey is very important. But Turkey has also been seen outside, not to say it's a member of NATO, but it has been seen as neutral in this war. It's the one that initiated the discussions. So Turkey is very important. And hopefully something is going to be achieved. Already the previous talks, even though they're not the follow-up of the current talks, saw the release of prisoners from both sides, and that deal was achieved in Turkey. So one hopes, of course, that this time around there's going to be something substantial as well that's going to be achieved.
And I mean, I hear what you're saying in terms of just the sincerity of going into these talks, but when we look at just from scenarios, to what extent do you think then if these peace talks are some sort of performative diplomacy, what are we likely then to see in the event that these talks fail?
Well, in the event that these talks fail, we would like to see escalation. And I think at the moment, as we speak, Vladimir Putin is extremely upset because of what happened yesterday. And you have Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who's now feeling emboldened, not only because help seemed to be coming, particularly from European countries, the last to promise some assistance was the Germans. So you see an emboldened Volodymyr Zelenskyy because of that assistance that's coming. But at the same time, you also see an emboldened Zelenskyy because of the new posture that Trump has embraced, notwithstanding what he was saying when he initially came into this in these negotiations. So I think what we're likely to see is an escalation. Putin is certainly going to escalate. In the past, I think, hour or so, we've seen the Russians bombarding a number of installations inside Ukraine. I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So we just need to brace ourselves for an escalation, and I don't see Putin begging down, nor agreeing to a ceasefire at the moment.
What do we then see in as far as an escalation is concerned? I mean, how is the U.S. likely to act, particularly because you're saying that Kyiv seemingly is emboldened?
Well, the USA, notwithstanding its threats, that's going to walk away from this. It has signed a very significant deal with Ukraine in terms of the rare earth minerals that they essentially need. And that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump decided to resuscitate or revive the negotiations with Ukraine, saying that the United States was not going to go in here for free. They deserve to be compensated in one way or the other, and that compensation came in the form of the deal that was signed between Ukraine and the United States. So there is a vested interest from the United States. I don't see them walking away from this, but I think what's likely to happen is to intensify the sanctions against Russia if Vladimir Putin doesn't come to the party.
Interesting developments there. Thank you so much, Thembisa, for your analysis. Thembisa Fakude is a senior research fellow and director at Afrasid, as we continue, of course, to monitor those ceasefire talks that are currently ongoing in Turkey.